all my friends out there who listen to the Cowboy Perspective, they're going to enjoy this conversation. I found me a couple of guys who love dogs and who know some stuff about dogs and a whole lot of other stuff, but maybe we'll just talk about the things that they're most comfortable with. So I'd like to introduce, is it Dr. Long? Dr. Long, Mr. Charles Long. He's a doctor. You work over at A&M?
I work at Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension at Overton.
Okay, good deal. Mr. Moon, now you're not a doctor, are you?
No, sir.
Okay, but we'll say you're a pretty bad man who's got an even badder dog by his side, right?
At times, yes, sir.
Yes. Okay, so real quick, let's see, where do we start? We were talking a little bit about how dogs play such a role in so many things. I was talking to Dr. Long earlier in the week, and we were talking about how a couple of dogs can replace a cowboy and a horse and what that really means for an operation. You get the dogs who know what their job is, who love their job. They'll go out there and help one guy do the job of two guys. That's a financial,
That's correct.
effective financial thing. Now, Officer Moon, tell us a little bit about what you and your dog do.
He is classified as a police officer. He is a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois. He is certified for criminal apprehension, course biting. He is certified in narcotic detection, evidence recovery, tracking of suspects. He does a vast variety of things.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm curious about is how did he learn to do all that?
Well, a lot of police dogs come out of Europe because of the genetics. Once they go through a series of tests to make sure that they're genetically sound and can do the job. And after those tests, they go to a trainer where that trainer puts the foundations in, their obedience, their out in the toy, out in the sleeves.
Wait, time out. What does that mean? What does that stuff mean?
Outing means removing, taking them, like when the dog bites, we have to have control and to be able to verbally out that dog and return him back to a heel. Because if we don't want the dog to stay on a person.
Sure, you got to be able to.
Any excessive time. As soon as they're apprehended, they are immediately taken off and the subject is placed into custody. And we want to do that with as minimal amount of force and damage as possible.
Yeah, sure. Totally understand that. Okay, so they get trained.
Yeah, they go through a trainer and get the foundation trainings, and then the officer goes and views the dogs, picks the dog if they want, and at that point they start their bonding period. And once the dog has bonded to the handler, they go through a handler's course, and during that handler's course they get put into a large amount of real life scenarios. So this
is stuff that you did with your dog.
Yes.
Yeah.
It teaches the dog to have trust in the handler, but it also teaches the handler to have trust in the dog.
Yep.
Because we don't know what we're going to go into Monday through Friday. I mean, it's always something new and something different.
Is there any reason we couldn't say what your dog's called? Is that going to be like, what's his name? What do you call him?
His name right now. My dog's name is Joker.
Joker.
Yeah.
That's cool.
He is a solid black Belgian Malinois. And when he smiles, he has, you can see the pink pigments in his jaws.
Yeah.
And so they named him Joker as a pup.
There we go.
Yeah.
I mean, well, thanks for sharing that because I'm just a civilian who enjoys the protection you provide and Joker. And I love bringing you onto the podcast to talk about that a little bit. Okay, so let's swing over here, and you jump in with questions, too. Have you got any questions after hearing that, Dr. Long?
Well, it was very interesting, and I know a little bit about the Malinois. I knew that they were, in the last several years, have become more and more present in police applications.
Yeah.
We talked about that just
true.
before. He said it was at one time a lot of German Shepherds, and it's really transferred to
For a long
the
time,
Malinois.
most of them were German Shepherds, I think. But the Malinois has become pretty prevalent.
Yeah,
that's true. They've predominantly taken over military, law enforcement, different applications because they're drives and their athletic.
Right.
Athleticism.
So now we start talking about cattle dogs. We're going to probably change breeds. Border Collie comes to my mind first.
Well, when you start talking about cattle dogs, I look at cattle dogs as another tool on the farm or ranch. I mean, I like dogs a lot, and I've had a lot of dogs in my lifetime, but when you start talking about an application in a ranching situation, it's about getting the job done and what it costs.
Yeah.
And the first thing is, what is the job? Cattle dogs of different breeds are used in different situations. For example, cattle dogs can be used along with horsemen to drive cattle out of a big pasture. And what that does, these are dogs that are under control, and this reduces the number of hands that you need to get the job done. And in that driving kind of situation, you could use border collies, kelpies, Australian cattle dogs, Australian shepherds, all of these dogs that you have control of, that you can keep behind the herd and direct them to pick up stragglers and stuff like that. Also, in brushy pastures in East Texas, South Texas, along the Gulf Coast, sometimes you use dogs to find and locate and hold up cattle.
Yeah.
Because and these dogs will hunt by scent. They'll either run a track or they'll wind, and they'll go to the cattle and they'll form a group. Well, these cattle, if they've never been worked with dogs, they have to get accustomed to it, or if they've been worked with dogs, it's pretty routine. They'll hold a herd together while riders will drive the cattle to wherever you're going. For that type of work, you would typically use dogs that bark, and that would be Catahoulars or black-mouthed curs. You can do any kind of a heading dog, but that's typically what's done. Then another deal, and Mr. Moon had talked about a dog to use, is if you wanted to, on a daily basis on a farm or ranch, had one or two dogs that you would take with you in your pickup. They don't take up much room. You have to be careful that you protect them in the summertime, have them shade and that kind of thing. But in that case, if you have a set of cattle that need to be moved, you can do that with only the dogs. Or if you find a place where the cattle have gotten out, you can probably bring them back in without having to go and get a horse.
Yeah.
In that case, you would use some of the breeds like the border collies, the kelpie, some of the crosses,
Any of those?
I'm trying to think of the. There's different crossbred breeds that are using that, but that's what you'd use. Or you can use them like in a feedlot situation where you'll bring cattle up to a bunk to get them to eat and that kind of thing. But it'd be different breeds that you would use for those different jobs.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love the idea of sharing this, because I think, like, most people picture a dog as just their pet, and I think we all find love for these dogs, and we really value them, but they're like a partner.
I have a question.
Okay.
On your Malinois, do you pet him?
I do, yes.
Well, people say that. I thought you probably did.
Mm-hmm.
People say don't pet a working dog.
That's true.
That's a bunch of baloney. If you've got the dog obedient and always obedient, petting is just a reward. For example, if you want to make your dog feel good when he's not near you, you come up with a word that you use when you pet him, like good dog, and he's over there, and you say good dog, and that makes him feel good. Well,
that's
when
right.
a dog is feeling good,
my gosh,
that's
it's
right.
amazing. It really, I
Isn't that
appreciate
right?
That is correct. I mean, you can say, you can use anything or any language. When you say good, if you blend that good with that positive affection,
see,
like
that's
you said, he
positive
could be
reinforcement right there.
50 feet away, and you say attaboy, and he gets all excited, because he's doing good. Because their whole thing in life is about one thing: pleasing you, pleasing the owner, pleasing the handler.
The primary thing about the dogs is for people who ever have them, take good care of them. Health, food, shelter, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you touched on it with summertime, the heat, the back of the truck.
You
they need water.
you need to be, when you're working your dog on cattle, always be aware of the dog's whether they're too hot or not. Pay attention to that, because if you don't, you'll lose some of your best dogs to heat stroke.
Yeah.
And that's a horrible situation.
Yeah.
That is true. I mean, you can see when they start struggling, because they're going to keep going. They're not going to stop
gotta
because
go
they're
hard.
trying to please
has no
you.
stop.
So you have to watch them. Just like when I deploy out of the patrol car, I have to look at the temperature of the concrete.
Yeah.
If I'm running on a highway fixing to run a car for narcotics, or if the handler's running a car for explosives or whatever, you have to take in consideration how hot is that concrete. Because if it's 105 degrees, I mean, they'll fry their pads. So you have to watch for that.
Yeah. If you got to put them in situations where they're in danger, you can put boots on a dog and protect his feet. You can do a lot of different things. Or
I have
just
not
say,
attempted
well,
that yet on a Malinois.
We're not going to lose a dog in a situation that's not an emergency just because we didn't pay attention.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
Take the time to take care of your dog, because that's all his whole goal is taking care of you.
That's your job.
That's right. And it's kind of true for cattle. I was up in the mountains. We were snow skiing, and we did a little snow sled team, a sled dog team.
Yeah.
That was an awesome experience. I mean, those
That would be
dogs
cool.
They were really cool. They were happy to be doing it. The guy was like, "Hey, we don't need them running. It's just a nice trot. Like they'll get." And it was like 40 degrees, and they were like, "This is too hot for the dogs. Really, I mean, it needs to be a little colder for them to do that work."
Some of the other breeds that work, I was trying to think of a while ago with a hanging tree dog. There's some people that use them, and there's different types of dogs like that people have put together, but you know, there's a lot of different dogs, and the training of a cattle dog or a sheep dog, you get a dog with the proper instincts, and then you put yard training and control so that you can control the situation to when you want a dog to start, stop, get in position, and all of that. And that's what the training is. But again, if you get a dog with good genetics and the right instinct, it's more efficient to do that.
Yeah, I had one good dog in my life. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. One good dog. He was a half Kelpie, half blue heeler. Mm-hmm. You could train that sucker to do anything. He liked to chase the ball. So, like you were talking about, that's my only relationship to it. I mean, I could have that sucker back up, stay right here all day, roll over, bark, whisper. It's like you can, whatever you think you can dream up, you can train them to do.
Yes.
All it takes is time and patience.
That's it.
Okay, so now for everybody listening, take the word dog out and plug in kids. And you're going to have a pretty successful life raising kids because they want to please you. All you got to do is figure out how to reward them for the good things, not reward them for the bad things. Teach them, hey, I'm proud of you, and they feel good about that. I always love the parallels of training horses, dogs, cattle, all this to also raising kids. It's very, very similar in my experience.
I agree with that.
And they're required to do things and be responsible and make decisions on their own. I mean, even these animals do those same things. Your kids got to be able to do that too. Yeah. If you don't teach them those things, they're not going to have them. All right, so real quick, last thing. Would you share a story of something you and Joker did that maybe is not, it's something that you don't mind sharing, or even you, Dr. Long? Just like think about some story that the listeners could just enjoy hearing. It's like, hey, one time we're on this drug run and this dog chased this guy down 500 yards. I don't know what it is. I'm just making stuff up, but I know this kind of stuff happens.
One thing that comes to mind, an agency was in pursuit on the interstate. Of course, they got the car stopped. People take off, they bail out and run. They called for a canine. I went down there, and the area had already been walked over by a handful of officers. So at that point, I just stepped back and do an area search. Yeah. Put him on long line and cast him in different areas and checking different areas to see if he can pick up the scent of the suspect. So we had walked down, come around, found the neighbor's 400 and some odd pound hog out there. Yeah. And of course helicopters buzzing around us. And I had to walk back up towards some abandoned vehicles, and I cast Joker out, and he went out there and immediately made a 90-degree turn and drugged me to the front of an SUV. And I looked underneath the SUV, and the bad guy was laying there all curled up, and made a successful apprehension. Nobody had to get bit, so it was a win for everybody.
Man, thanks for sharing that. It's stuff that you do every day that most of us has no clue about, and you're using that partner, that dog, in a really cool way. You got any stories similar?
Well, a good many years ago back, I had a really good friend, and I was helping him with his cattle one Saturday, and his fella he'd gone to school with came by and said, could we help him pen his cattle? And I said, okay. And so we'd about got my friend's cattle fixed ready, so we went over to this fellow's place, and I'd only brought 2 dogs because my friend's cattle were broke. I mean, I'd worked them enough that it was a pretty routine deal. But anyway, we went over to this other fellow's place, and he had cattle, and it wasn't a big pasture, 20, 30, 40 acres, just a little patches. But the thing about it, he had his cattle were a mixture. He had a set of Angus cows, he had a set of Brangus cows, then he had a few crossbreds. And so I put the 2 dogs I had with me, I put them out, and I said, this is going to be a bigger job than I thought. I said, it's not but about 30 minutes to my house. I'm going to get a couple more dogs.
Yeah.
So I went to the house and brought back a couple dogs. So I had 4 dogs, and these were Border Collie type dogs. Anyway, I started working. Well, the first thing was the Angus cows, because these cattle were not dog broke.
Right.
And the Angus cows figured they could kill the dogs. And it took a while to convince them they couldn't. But while we were doing that, the other cattle went off. The Brangus and all left, which is okay. So I pinned the Angus first. Now I'm talking about doing this afoot.
Okay, you didn't have a horseback.
No, I was not horseback.
Okay.
Anyway, but it's not a big pasture. So I pinned the Angus and in a little trap by the pins. And so then I went back and bunched up the Brangus, and they handled pretty good. We pinned them. And then we were at the pins then, and there were about half a dozen crossbreds. And I just, I stood at the pen and I said, I just sent them.
Yeah.
Go around and bring them. He said, what are you doing? I said, we're going to bring those others in just a little bit. Now, I'm talking about some pretty tough old dogs. I mean, I worked them regular. They were in shape.
Yeah.
And what I did was I said, go get them. Do whatever. Anyway, pretty soon here comes the crossbreds, and the owner of the cattle said, well, they're coming right in. I said, your problem was not. They knew exactly where the pen was. They just had decided they didn't have to get in it. Yeah. They brought them on in, and we shut the gate. And then he went to telling me about everybody who had been there trying to pin those cattle over the last month or 6 weeks. Yeah. So I felt like, well, maybe my dogs had earned their feed for that day.
They did a good job that day.
Awesome. Well, that's a great little insight from here at the Texas Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association from a couple of gentlemen. I really appreciate you sharing. You took some of your time in your day to come share with my audience about really a thing I don't know much about. Like I said, I've had 1 dog.
There are a lot of people working, day workers and different ones, ranchers and all, that are effectively using dogs around. And they're labor savers and, properly handled. And it's all about having the right dog for the right job and having control. So you've got a start and a stop in a position.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. A dog you don't have control on is worse than...
It's a wreck.
It's worse. I don't even know. It's like a wreck, I guess that's the best way to put it. So having a dog can help, the right dog that is under control. But one that's out of control is only going to wreck it.
And the dogs have to behave they've got to have stock sense. They have to respect the herd, and they have to have a dependable orientation toward the stock. Running and chasing is not working cattle.
Yeah.
Whether you use a dog, a horse, a four-wheeler, or a foot, chasing is not working.
Yes. Right there.
Nah, you're right. That's not going to work.
That's the mic drop. Thank you, fellas. Really appreciate it. everybody go learn a little bit more about dogs. Check out these canine officers. If you find somebody, if you ever see one, high five them, tell them thank you. I don't think they expect much more than that. We appreciate what you do. Dr. Long, thanks for the education.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm not going to make you tell everybody about your knees.
My knees, just the fact that I've had them replaced and it's the best thing I ever did.
Yeah, that's right. So if you're thinking about getting
I can walk again.
That's right. If you're thinking about getting your knees replaced, this man had a good experience. He said, if you're going to do it, do the rehab. Like, get real serious about the rehab. And then don't be afraid of it. Go do it because your life will be different. Thanks, everybody.